Next up, we're going to be discussing how to cultivate cultural connections at the intersection of things like music, gaming, and also blockchain technology. It's not a sort of immediate sort of merger of topics, but our next panel of guests is going to do a deep dive into exactly how this intersection is creating not only sort of innovative experiences, but also new forms of artistic expression. It is a great topic, and we've got a great moderator to oversee the conversation. Please welcome back to the stage Nikita Sachdev, who is founder and CEO of Luna Media Corporation. She's also got her guests with her. A round of applause, please.
Awesome. Alrighty, awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or evening almost. It's great to be back on the stage, and let's kick off with some introductions. I'll go first, and then you guys can take the lead, and then we'll start with the very interesting topic. So my name is Nikita Sachdev, and I am the CEO of Luna Media Corporation. We're a topco company that houses 7 companies. We're known for which our bread and butter is Luna PR, and we are a PR agency, very straightforward, in the Web3 space. Been around since 2017. I started my crypto career with Wobi Exchange in Singapore back then, and moved to Dubai 4 years ago. We're headquartered here with offices in London, New York, and presence in Singapore. And yeah, let's go.
Hi everyone, my name is Lena. I'm the founder of a project called Claynation. We are an animation project and entertainment provider. We launched in 2021, actually. Our first NFT was minted pre-Bored Ape. We've done over 50,000 digital assets that have been minted on the Cardano blockchain, over 50 million ADA in Cardano in volume, in trading volume. And we have partnerships with The Sandbox, Ledger, Snoop Dogg, Cordell Brothers, and Good Charlotte, and many others to come. Yeah, looking forward to the panel.
My name is Yad. I'm chairman and co-founder of Animoca Brands. We're known as being an investor in the space, particularly intersection of culture, entertainment, gaming, and so on. We've done today over 540 investments in Web3, but actually we're also operators. So actually we're the owners of The Sandbox, for instance, and also a variety of game studios, and excited to have a conversation around the intersection of culture and blockchain.
Yeah. Well, hello everybody. My name is Sheldon Hunt. I'm the head of the Cardano ecosystem with Emergo. And so yeah, Emergo being one of the founding entities of Cardano, but with a special focus on commercialization. I myself began my crypto journey back in, I guess it was like 2013, 2014 in Hong Kong. Starting out with Bitcoin meetups, and then met Vitalik there and pitched me on smart contracts. I didn't think it would really work. I kind of regret that now. But it was very interesting, and have been in and out of the space since then, but I have been in Cardano now almost 3 years. Have been with IOG and then helped set up Intersect, and now today pushing ahead with all these various exciting intersections, or ecosystem plays, I should say, with Emergo, and a huge part of that is cultural. So just, yeah, very much looking forward to jumping in. And
awesome. So when I was assigned this panel, music, culture, and gaming, the first thing that came to mind with the intersection of technology was this digital world, the metaverse, AR, VR experiences. And all I could think of was the lack of the human touch in these experiences. Are we losing that human interaction as we move deeper into this world?
I'm not sure that we are, because we have an ability to connect with more people than ever when we're doing this kind of, the integration of the intersection of art, tech, and community and music, like you said. So we're able to connect with people on a completely different level, even though, it's not the same as maybe going and meeting people in real life. We're able to actually bring all these people together from all over the world, and I think that's a next level human touch.
Yeah, I mean, I would concur in the sense that I think technology broadly has brought more people together and actually created a richer type of subcultures, as it were, because things that were niche cultures before started to blow up. You see this in art, you see this in music, you see this in all sorts of areas, film and media as well. This wouldn't be possible, for instance, to have this type of new cultural mediums, even like NFTs, for instance, unless there was a way in which you can connect all the people around the world into one common cause, for instance. So I think there is that. But I think the other thing, of course, that we see as well is that, there's only so many Zoom calls you can have, and there's only so many virtual experiences. You still want to have physical connections as well. And I think all I would say is that it isn't that it is replacing our current need for connection. It is adding new layers to the connections that we have. And I think the best and most successful connections we can make are the ones that can do all of them, right? I think sometimes people take it to the extreme. So they only connect virtually and then forget about the physical, and that doesn't work either. But actually, it's an enhancing perspective. We were traveling more, which means that we do have to be online to keep a connection. But then, for instance, post-COVID, when we were finally able to meet people, we were able to meet with them in the sense that it felt like we weren't separated for 3 years or 2 years. Right? And I think that's actually, if you can balance it that way, I think that's a very beautiful thing.
But was that from a business perspective?
Oh, for personal as well.
For personal.
Yeah.
That's where I'm intrigued. For personal, from a personal perspective, I'm interested because I feel like the people that would want to submerge into like a digital world I think it's beneficial for those who may have social anxiety.
So maybe I'll give you an observation, at least for those who have kids, right, and how your kids interact. They play online games like Roblox, for instance. They actually make most of their social interactions, let's call it after hours, online playing these games. But actually, when they meet in person, it is not that they are on the PC when they meet in person necessarily. They are able to connect and laugh and talk about as if they've had a relationship before, in a way. And I don't think it's that different from, maybe we're from, maybe I am, certainly none of you are, from the generation where we used to be on the phone the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And we were basically just literally, with the hand phone, for those of you who remember the rotary phone, I would literally, you drag them into your bedroom, you might do your homework or something, and you're on the phone. What were you doing? You were actually virtually connected through copper with some other person around the world. We're just now doing this at scale.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I would dare say we are still if I'm going to say there was anything beneficial that came out of the whole experience of lockdown with COVID was a need to, as you were saying, find a nice balance between the human connection and then the virtual connection. I know there's a lot of excitement around, okay, we're stuck in our house, let's just do it virtually. And it did certainly provide a bit of a, you can scratch that itch socially, so to speak. But it did turn out that there was a lot that was left to be desired. And I think it's still the case where we're still at the very beginning stage of what the metaverse could be. I know that's a whole other conversation for perhaps another day, but it's still undeniably early, I would think, because we now have generations of children who have grown up with iPads, right? And we've got generations that have no idea how to even send an email all together on the same planet around the same dinner table. And they've got to find ways of just carrying on conversations. And so we're quite hybrid in our approaches, and it's still very early. It's a little bit messy at times. But with COVID, if anything, you realize you can't be an extreme in one or the other.
I kind of want to add sort of an observation that we're making when you look at, for instance, like NFTs. So when I think a lot of people comment around sort of this aspect of let's call it digital dystopia, because they look at time people spending on TikTok and Instagram, and it feels like, oh, they don't really have a relationship. In fact, maybe you feel even lonelier as a result. But the point is that when you're on Instagram, you actually don't have a relationship. Right?
Yeah.
So this is the distinction here. So you're maybe on Instagram and you might have 100,000 followers. You have no idea who they are, right? And they will see what you're doing, but it's more like actually, almost like digital TV. Right?
Yes.
I can't interact with them. There's not that, right? But with gaming, for instance, there is interaction. When you squad together, there's 8 of you or 16 of you or 20 of you, you can build a relationship. And I know who you are. And so for the NFTs, for instance, what really made it powerful, and especially in the first wave back in 21, and actually 2020, 21, was you created authentic connections. Because if I owned this NFT, I knew that you actually had something that was real. Yeah. And so actually, I think the point about the social connection is around the authenticity related to that. If you have an authentic relationship, it's great. And it doesn't matter if it's physical or virtual. Yeah. But if I'm basically connecting with millions of people, but I actually don't have a relationship, then you feel lonely. And I think that's kind of the whole sort of social media dichotomy, which is that social media, sort of the way it's designed in Web 2, actually amplifies loneliness because you can't have authentic connections.
Yeah, I want to talk
Yeah.
more about metaverse. Actually, Sheldon, I think it was an important topic for this discussion because both metaverse and NFTs had so much intersection with, I guess, culture, music, and even lifestyle. I mean, we saw Nike being one of the most successful use cases. I think they reported they did over $180 million in revenue through their NFTs. But then it sort of seemed like it became a bit of a fad. It became like people trying to use it as marketing campaigns. But personally, I feel like that really brought in a new wave of artists to come in. And Elena, I know you did a lot with Snoop Dogg as well. So what are your thoughts on like the NFT and metaverse space, and where is it going from here?
It's hard to say where it's going in the sense that it evolves so quickly. So like something that, like you said, it was a really big thing. Everyone wanted to be part of it, including Snoop Dogg, including Good Charlotte and the people that we partnered with. And it was an amazing opportunity to actually have that experience where people were that eager and keen to be part of that. Because, if a few months ago or prior to that, if you actually had tried to reach out to a celebrity as big as Snoop, you'd very likely be getting an out of office. Effectively, you're going to get someone. You're not likely to get very far with that. But there was this period where people were so curious that they wanted to be part of it, and it opened up this amazing way for people like Snoop Dogg to connect with fans in a way that was different to just a concert, which obviously concert's great, but it was something to explore there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think NFTs sort of had a big wave in 21 and 22, and I think they're going to come back in a big way. I'll sort of quickly elaborate why. Not just being bullish on our own portfolio, but I think the reason is that today, the NFTs of today are basically, the meme coins today are the NFTs of the past in a way. And that's basically because they share similar traits around the cultural and the economic capital. The difference is that in 2020, particularly in the early days of the sandbox, the people who were getting into things like NFTs were purely cultural in context. It wasn't about money, because there was no money to be made, right? And then when it became very speculative, it brought in a whole wave of people. And remember, people who were basically just signing up for mints just because they didn't care about the project. They were just hoping that it would like 20x or something. That was the only reason they did this. And look here, basically 3 years later, right? Meme coins are the same thing. Do I care about the sort of culture of that meme coin? Some of the early guys did, but actually now it's really more like, oh, I'm hoping this will 100x. And that's why you're joining that. And so meme coins and NFTs are mixing in the same pool. So I would say that if you took them together, the same attention, the same mass adoption, the same audiences are coming through. But what happens is that there's a percentage of them, right, that actually end up making a certain amount of money in the space, and then they want to seek something that's beyond economic sort of recognition. Right? It's kind of like you could be a millionaire, and that's great. But what's the difference between someone who has 1 million or 2 million? It's materially a lot, but reputationally actually very similar. Right? It doesn't really seem to matter. You're a millionaire. Whether you're 5 or 3, it doesn't matter. So how do you distinguish? And this is where cultural capital comes in. This is why people buy art. This is why people want to have a car of a certain type, or maybe a Birkin bag. Right? In the physical world, we distinguish ourselves based on these things that form our identity, and then we invest in them. And actually, we invest most of our money in things like our digital reputation and our digital identity. And I think this is the part where we're seeing that evolution. And the reason we think NFTs will have this comeback is because the wealth that is created basically in the Web3 space, it will flow into the cultural assets of that generation in the same way that people may not know, but the Arnault family is the richest or second richest family in the world, and what do they sell? Luxury goods. Right? It's not utility at all, because that's actually how we identify ourselves. The same we think will happen ultimately with Web3. So they're kind of mixing in the same pool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a $2 to $3 trillion market cap for the last 3 years, so it's just going in cycles, and it's the same amount of capital being rinsed in.
Yeah, I was just going to maybe add to this. What I find quite interesting is that if we look in the grand scheme, and this is me taking a bit of a step back, thinking about culture and art as it pertains to just humanity. I think there's been, for the last few generations, quite a bit of gatekeeping when it comes to who generates art and how it's kind of distributed. Where we stand now with NFTs is an ability to take down some of the barriers to artistic entry that have held certain communities back over time. And I think to all of like the young creators out there who maybe want to make a movie, but you look at how movies are made today in 2024, and it hasn't fundamentally changed that much from even a century ago. And so there are still some major cultural industries that exist today that have not really been truly disrupted by Web3, and that stands to really be further, I guess you could say, upgraded, to be kind of compartmentalized, to be put on chain. I think gaming itself is in a wonderful place for Web3 because it's an example of an entertainment sector that has really been able to play into the freemium. There's a large spectrum of what can be done there, but there's so many other spaces within our cultural industries that have not yet had that same kind of evolutionary expansion with technology.
I mean, just to add on gaming, so there's about 3.4 billion people in the world that play games. It's an industry that's almost 300 billion, which is bigger than music and movies combined, basically, as from a current standpoint. But what's also fascinating is that gaming, and I think this speaks to our human nature, which is why I think culture always sits on top, even though maybe in the world of Web3, we focus a lot on the financial aspect because of its nature. But culture, from a human standpoint, all stands on top because the reason we have fast GPUs that ended up first starting with mining and basically then went into AI is because of gaming. NVIDIA as a company would not have existed if gaming as an industry didn't happen, for instance, right? And why did people want to buy a fast GPU? Because they wanted to play a game better. It wasn't because they wanted to make money from the game. That didn't exist. It was because they wanted to have fun, entertainment. They had a desire to have this type of stuff. It's also social. Games are very social. So they bought these things and drove a whole industry. And then NVIDIA, and of course ATI before it became AMD as well. And now NVIDIA basically became the chipset that enabled things like mining and eventually went for AI. Right? These foundational things happened digitally in an entertainment space and then drove the rest of the industry. And we see many stories around that where our innovation doesn't begin with a utility, it begins with something fun and entertaining. Right? That's where it happens, because as humans, that's actually what drives us. When you think about what makes us happy and where do we make these connections, it's about joy, right? Yeah. And what makes joy? It's culture, fun, and entertainment. Yeah.
But so culture is something that's been around for thousands, I mean, since the beginning of mankind. And today there's still traces of it, where we go, we have so many different cultures. And in the digital world, it's just one big unified culture. Where is the originality going? Where's the uniqueness? Like, how will we preserve this?
I think even in the digital landscape, agreed, it does feel a bit like it's together, but as Yat was saying earlier, I think there are so many subcultures within that. So when it comes to things like meme coins, when it comes to every single NFT project, when it comes to all the different games, even within those, I think there are different communities, different subcultures. And with more artists and creators getting on board and jumping into that, they're creating their own culture there as well. So I think it's actually, in a way, immortalizing a lot of current cultures now. I can't really I don't know how to explain that exactly.
Just how now you have the Roman culture. You go to Vatican City and you see these old museums. In the future, maybe we'll have a Dogecoin museum.
Oh no, absolutely we will.
Yeah, and I think it's I think it's very possible.
Definitely.
And that's also because when you think, for instance, from my parents' generation, the kind of culture that we worship today, whether this is, Taylor Swift or whether this is superheroes and men in tights and that kind of stuff, right? That sounds ridiculous if you told someone 50 years ago that we're going to worship men in spandex, right? I mean, that just conceptually, right?
Sounds okay.
Right? But here we are and, watching Marvel movies and basically skin-tight outfits, seeing all their muscles, and that's great, but back then would have been considered outrageous, right? Yeah. So that's the cultural concepts that we now see, and there are altars being built towards that as well, right? So whether this is a Bored Ape or whether this is, a meme coin, and also experimentation in culture, what's happened with technology is open to everyone now. Mm-hmm. So this was something that, maybe this person knew how to play an instrument, and it took time. Suddenly with AI, he can make the music faster, right? Or think about photography. Photography was considered a very special skill back in my day. And then, then came the smartphone and then Instagram, and now everyone was a photographer, right? Yeah. But actually that led to other forms of innovation that then fed AI to create better photos that then you can use, where you really just have to imagine it and create it as opposed to necessarily having that skill to do it per se. And some may lament it, But I actually think if you can harvest and nurture that, I actually think it opens up new avenues of capabilities. It's like, for instance, I grew up at a time where the calculator was not allowed in school. So I'm now totally dating myself, right? And it was considered cheating, right? But now everyone uses a calculator, and you don't have to think and focus around being a human computer to basically do a creative task or be a great architect, for instance, because the computer can do that and actually leaves you up much more to imagination, which I think is much more to our human nature anyway.
But in order for culture, to even form, you need a community, right? So I definitely see the communities with meme coins. I'm a massive meme coin junkie myself. But, one thing that attributed to people said attributed to the metaverse is kind of like, I don't want to say failure, but kind of like disappearance within like the bull market or bear or whatever within the cycle was the lack of users, right? In the metaverse. There were tons of articles on that.
So I would disagree with that notion. So I don't know if you want to say something about that. But
I'm glad.
Maybe I'll start first. And the reason why I disagree with the notion, and first, I think there's a PR issue, because when Facebook went out and renamed itself Meta, it became the metaverse by definition. And so when the horizon basically failed, then everyone said, oh, because Facebook failed, the whole metaverse failed. But actually, to us, the metaverse isn't one platform. It's not, say, Sandbox or Decentraland or whatever. It's actually what we're doing in Web3 with ownership. So for instance, in the same way that people consider Fortnite and Roblox a sort of Web2 metaverse, actually Axie Infinity or basically the sort of blockchain games where people are making a real living and actually having income and having ownership on things, basically giving jobs to millions of people, that's a metaversal experience that has really grown and sort of demonstrated value in that. When you own an NFT, that's actually owning something, in our view, in the open metaverse that gives you value. For instance, if I own a Bored Ape, I'm now a target because I'm actually someone that has a certain asset base that I can derive value. It's kind of like no different than saying if I could really target every Rolex watch owner, genuinely, what is that worth from a marketing standpoint? And that comes in the form of airdrops, for instance, right? So there's multiple sort of things around that. So I think the metaverse is not dead at all.
I mean, 3 years ago, I think 3 years ago, when Sandbox and Decentraland they were top 50 tokens in terms of market cap. There were constant activities. I think Snoop Dogg bought a house in Sandbox.
He did. Yes, he still has it.
He still has a massive amount of funding coming in. As a PR agency, every week we were getting 3-4 metaverse companies knocking on our door saying, we need PR, we're launching a metaverse. And I think that Sandbox and Decentraland really set the stage. Like they really showcased like what the metaverse was all about. And even we were getting clients that were advertising within Sandbox and Decentraland in the billboards that were within the metaverse. So I saw for a moment at the time, I really saw the potential. So it's very interesting to get your take that it's not dead, that it needs to come back. I'm just curious, like how and what will be the use cases? Will it still just be like what was the purpose of like this land? Is it like a getaway? Is it to do business? Is it just like
I think we'll still be going through issues of like trial and error. Like completely agree that this is still something that has not at all gone away. And there are certain like waves of interest that come, right? Like there's the meme coin season. Everybody wants to talk about AI. Like there are these seasons in time, but they're never truly dead. They never truly fade away. There are people who still write letters to each other. There's still all of these various niches that do exist out there in the world. But when it comes to the question of like what will it take to get people back into the metaverse, I think it will just organically happen. It won't be like a big, sexy pile-in. It will be a gradual, and of course, like we've talked quite a bit about this before, and it kind of ties into what I think will be quite interesting related to like IDs, DIDs, right? To have this gradual process where you build up over time your digital existence, your digital character, your digital identity, and you will just organically come to a point where you can say quite definitively, oh, I'm already in the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's also, when you think about sort of the way that these sort of networks, whether it's a metaverse or a game, are constructed, the token actually represents effectively an ownership in that network in itself. Mm-hmm. And so when I actually become owner of the token, which could be non-fungible, doesn't have to be just fungible, like a meme coin, actually I am now owner of the network and I am a participant, and now I am actually part of their sort of giving it agency. And this to me is the powerful construct that actually enables, it's almost like, when you look at a token network, you can almost look at it like a social network as well, right? They're just sort of just, maybe Reddit subgroups, but the difference is that now the community gets to own it. And that actually is what's happening. And the attention is more diluted because in 21 and 22, when you thought metaverse, there were maybe 3 projects that mattered, right? Because there was just not that many. And so all the attention was focused around. It's the same with Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity is still a multi-billion-dollar project. Okay? Yeah. It's just not worth 20 billion. And so let's just, let's just sort of put this in perspective and say, yes, it's a shame that they're not worth 20, but really, right? So, and we're earliest investors in them, and we want them to succeed, don't get me wrong, but so there was a little bit of hype, of course, there. But let's not say it's dead because it's still worth billions of dollars, okay? And it's still driving, millions of dollars of sort of meaningful revenue. So I think that's just one perspective to make sure of. But now you have, over 2 million meme coins have basically launched this year alone, right? And then you have, of course, how many hundreds of gaming tokens and metaverse tokens released. Yeah. So what's happening now is you have a sort of a dilution of attention where the projects are more distributed. So it's not where you can sort of point to one project and say how that's going. It's actually something that's more divided. The entire altcoin space has increased by over $300 billion in the last 12 months. So it's not just Bitcoin and Ethereum. It just doesn't feel that way because amongst the field of all the tokens that launched, actually when you all add it up, it's actually a bigger number. So it's not taking away market, it's making it bigger, but it's just distributing it more broadly. But I also want to say that many of these metaverses take time to develop, like a good game. So I don't know how many of you have seen, for instance, Off the Grid. That's basically a AAA gaming title which is number 1 on Epic at the moment, PlayStation and Xbox. People have no idea that this is a blockchain game, right? Yep. I think the Fortune headline article is, people are loving this game and don't know it's crypto or whatever. So I'm paraphrasing now. But anyway, that's kind of what this is, right? Yeah. And again, it took a while to make a game that reached that sort of level of quality where the Web 2 gamer actually says, hey, you know what? I'd like to play this game. And this comes from my other point about the metaverse and gaming, which is that most of the gamers in Web 3 today are not gamers from Web 2. Yes. They are a new category of gamer, right? Yes. With ownership and a little bit more financial. It's the difference between people, for instance, who play poker. There's one group of people who play poker to make money, and there's a whole different group of people who play poker just to have fun, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the distinction between the two characters. And we have a lot of players in the original Web3 era who are in there to make money. They're still the same game, but a different category. Because of the 3.4 billion people who play games, there's another almost 3 billion who do not play games, right? So that's the market expansion area. Yeah. But with games like Off the Grid or other ones like Phantom Galaxies or whatever, these games are bringing in basically traditional gamers because they have the quality and bringing them in. So it's coming in from both sides. Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit more about decentralized identities. And, we've, as you mentioned, Sheldon, I mean, there's going to be a new wave of people that build their identities online, and they may. I mean, the pros is that there's no stereotypes. You are who you are online. I mean, there might even not be any language barriers at this point, but you see people kind of losing a lack of responsibility. There's a new wave of cyberbullying, of keyboard warriors. I've dealt with it on X a couple of times. So, I mean, do you think users know the implications of kind of building an identity online and the responsibilities that come with that?
I would dare say most people do not. As we've seen on a very regular basis, right, with cyberbullying, there's a lot that you can get away with currently in the Wild West of... It's not even just Web 3, just Web 2. And I would hope that this is actually something that we can solve in Web 3. Mm-hmm. I'm very much convinced this is something we'll be able to crack. Because as we move more and more, and this is maybe me going off a little bit topic here, but there is, I think, a concern among some that as we have more AI agents come online, as we have more people with anonymous personalities, we can end up creating a digital space that is kind of toxic to navigate. It becomes something that some refer to it as a bit of a dark forest, right? And you'll have communities that will just live in bubbles underground, right? They want to hide out from everything else that's going out there in cyberspace because it's dark, it's threatening. You're not sure if the other person on the other end of that conversation is a bot or not. And so these are like real concerns that need to be solved for, and I do think we stand a good chance of cracking that with some DIDs, with actually having some confirmed proof of existence, right, to crack through. And it comes out also with like IP and with music, right? If we're going to have now AI agents who are making up new mixes for Snoop Dogg, but they're not Snoop Dogg, right? You're going to need to have confirmations in some kind of capacity, right?
That's interesting, actually. I want to dive in deeper into that. So AI mixes of Snoop Dogg that are not Snoop Dogg. We've seen a lot of celebrities come in and petition against AI. And Lena, you worked with so many of these artists. So what's the sentiment right now in Web3 as a whole? Because not just with NFTs or with crypto and blockchain, but with AI also being a part of this.
It feels like something that's being really missed here, and it sounds obvious, but hey, blockchain. We can use that obviously to authenticate whether it is real or not. Well, we should be using it more in that sense. And I think that once that clicks, and like we're all working towards making that click, right? That's why we're having these relationships with different artists, so that we can actually say, hey, by the way, we can make sure people do know this is actually you, and we can authenticate that on the blockchain. And I think that's such an untapped use case, and I'm really excited to actually see that expand and explode, and I think it will do.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, in music, there's a company called Pixelinks with Chorus AI. What they do is, I think 3Lau did some music tracks that he basically sort of embedded as, I think it was NFTs, as a way to basically protect the intellectual property rights over that soundtrack. But then anyone who owned the NFT could then basically use that soundtrack. But the value didn't come necessarily from just using the music, because someone, as you say, could just copy the music. But they now had permission to say, this is a soundtrack that was used with 3Lau, so to speak, right? So the value isn't actually, because it's kind of like the difference of, is it authentic or is it maybe a copy? The authentic version that is essentially given proof is actually more valuable, and that's something that you can now scale from an IP licensing standpoint, on chain as well. But I want to touch a little bit on digital identity in terms of, I do agree with you that Web3 will solve that, because the reason why we have cyberbullying is because there's nothing at stake to bully.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the person who does it can be anonymous, or as an identity has no consequences, because there's no reputation attached to it. He can just open up a new account, or he can be hidden, or he can be anonymous. And I think our industry is quite obsessed about anonymity because of the whole sort of permissionless, trustless aspect of it. Yeah. But I think it's a bit of a mistake to say anonymous. I think people care about their privacy. But if you think about a society that is entirely anonymous, it can't work. Right? If you're basically doing business or only have a relationship with someone who's new every single moment, then it will break down, right? I mean, how can you go to, build a relationship with someone when the person next day is, again, someone new, right? It doesn't work. Yeah. And there's very clear statistics that show basically the kind of societies and countries that have high levels of trust in a query, like, do you trust people in your country or in your nation? They always have the highest GDPs, because you can only have good economic transactions and respect of property rights in a place where there is a high degree of trust, right? If I don't trust you, then nothing works, right?
Yep.
And so what is the antidote to that? And so this is kind of what we're trying to solve with Mochaverse, but I think other DIDs are kind of thinking about it the same way, which is reputation. Because think about what is the virtual thing that you invest in all the time. It's your reputation. Reputation is the one thing that you keep investing in over time. And once you have a reputation, then not only don't you want to give up on it, actually good things come to you. Right? For instance, in the physical world, it's like, okay, where did you go to school? And where did you work? And then what do your friends say? And what's your relationships and who you're associating with? These are all things that attest to your reputation. And that's what blockchain does really well. So the antidote to your thing about cyberbullying would be, if I do this, then I basically get a knock on my reputation from the community. Yep. And then what happens is that actually, okay, I can start afresh. I can start as a new person. But of course, I don't accrue any benefits. And I think the carrot is always better than the stick. Meaning that if I know that I'm making a better reputation for myself, as we do in real life, and good things come to me, then I will behave better, which is basically how society generally functions. So I think, and we can do this now in a decentralized way, not in a centralized government way, which basically tries to control you. Because the kind of societies that have bad trust tend to have big police forces, right? Right? And that's the kind of thing that our industry doesn't want, understandably so. So I think it's a great way to sort of decentralize effectively an ecosystem by creating actually better trust, which will then basically bring more prosperity.
Yeah, a bit of accountability, I think it makes a huge
Absolutely.
difference.
Yeah,
Actually,
right.
just today somebody came over and said, when you doxed, I bought 2 Clay Nations. And I thought it was a really interesting take, just because they knew who we were.
Yeah.
It just built that layer of trust. And I think, not suggesting everyone needs to dox, that's definitely not the answer, but yeah, you're right, just having that kind of layer.
And I think the thing about digital identities, particularly in blockchain, is that ZK proofs make it possible for you to attest your reputation without revealing who you are.
Yeah.
And this solves many issues like GDPR. GDPR's issue is that the ownership of my data and the privacy of that data belongs to actually a platform. So the platform has to promise that it doesn't abuse it. But with zero-knowledge proofs, actually, the platform doesn't know anything about you. You're just giving it permission to see certain things that you give it access to. And again, and I think that'll just scale a lot of innovation, because now you don't have to deal with overly large regulation that restricts you.
Yeah.
And most of this would be in a digital setting, correct?
Well, the digital setting will inform a physical one, because actually, eventually, what will happen is, I think, that digital identities will then transfer into things like your passport and other things. Because there is a kind of, we could look at things like social credit score as dystopian, but in a decentralized way, actually, it provides a lot of opportunity for other things. For instance, in Web3, unsecured credit. If you actually build reputation over a certain period of time, then you can open up unsecured credit markets. In Web3, everything's collateralized, because actually, I don't trust anyone, right? But in Web2, I can go to a bank and get a credit card, and I don't have to put collateral. Why? Because I have a reputation, because I have a job history, and I'm not going to abandon society, because if I do, then there's consequences. And that's actually what is possible in Web3 in a decentralized way. And when you open up the unsecured credit market, like student loans, for instance, that's a $2.2 trillion market. I mean, that's basically the size of the crypto market as a whole.
But yeah, this could lead to a generation of people that don't leave their eyes off a screen or off a digital kind of world. Will the next generation grow up to have this social anxiety, to be socially awkward?
I mean, you guys can comment, but if that were true, then we would already be here. I mean, we spend on average, I think statistically, certain countries between 7 to 10 hours a day online anyway, right? And it's only going up. But I think we've seen post-COVID that there is a drive for us to actually have human connection. So I don't actually think we are only going to be online, right? Yeah. But I do think that the digital reputation and digital ID systems around that will actually make things more efficient. And also we can start, like for instance, even in a conference like this, we can actually attest to our reputation without actually knowing who you are. And that's okay. Yep. Actually, I think that's beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, there's been a huge rise in young people pushing for experiences in real life as well. So like instead of maybe going to the pub or just going and sitting, because you end up using your phone even in those environments, people have started, there's been like a huge rise, especially in London, of people booking all these different types of experiences, things like escape rooms, but like many different types. There's like a huge rise, and I think that is because people actually do eventually, after maybe using it too much, you do end up actually craving that time offline as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We were talking about artists coming in. A couple of years ago, I was in a conference and I met one of my favorite rappers, Rick Ross, and I sat next to him. I said, Rick Ross, you should put your music on NFTs. You should you should get in the space. Every major artist, celebrities in the space, and he goes, baby girl, I need to feel my assets. And I still remember that. I laughed so much when he said that. But I mean, look how far we are. I mean, some people just they don't understand that this is an asset. NFTs, crypto, that these are all assets. I mean, they're thinking about tangible assets. We still have a long way to go to get there. There's a lot of education that needs to come into play. How do we bring in mass adoption?
I think some people need to, and I know this is a bit of it doesn't quite work, but some people do need to discover it on their own. And I think there's that whole thing about if they say it, it's true. So if somebody like Rick Ross, he stumbles upon it and decides actually, hey, this is cool, and he makes a move instead of someone saying like, oh, have you looked into this, or you should do this. That can definitely help. But yeah, education and other people doing it, once you see that many people taking part in adoption, it just kind of snowballs, I think.
Yeah. I would say like, the reality is that like the first billion organic users of Web3 they're likely going to come for the fun of it. They're going to come for games. It's not going to be realistically because of some complicated triple staking DeFi protocol. That would be cool though, but no pressure if that doesn't happen, everybody. But I think it's going to come through gaming. It's going to come through that need to have fun and connect to people. And once you provide the opportunities for that, they will come in droves. And it doesn't matter if it's Web3 on the label or not. Thinking of off the grid.
I mean, definitely gaming is the sort of utility way of creating mass adoption. But I would say if I were to put an umbrella on top of all of that, it's storytelling.
Yeah.
So as humans, we are all living on storytelling. And to your point about value, actually, it's all virtual. Most of our value is virtual. I mean, it's funny that a rapper would say, what's the physical thing? What is his value? It's his voice. It's his talent. It's what's in his mind. None of this is physical. He's not making money because he's producing stuff,
Like
right?
CD.
So that's exactly the point, right? And when you think about when you buy a Rolex watch, do you buy it because it tells you the time, because it's made of materials? The value of it is 90% virtual in its construction, right?
Yeah.
So, and even our entire industry, or even the story of money, or the story of politics, it is all narration. So I think if we come with powerful stories, then that's actually how we bring mass adoption.
Yeah.
And gaming are these multitudes of stories. They are basically the medium of the youth today, right? I mean, we used to, well, my generation used to watch MTV, but other generations had radio, and so, black and white TV, whatever that was. Those were mediums at the time, and gaming is the medium of today, and that's how we were bringing mass adoption.
You talked about the right narrative with metaverse. You talked about storytelling. I feel like my job is very important as a PR agency in the space and spreading the right word and spreading the right news. We have just a minute left to wrap it up. Where is this space going, and what advice do you have for content creators, for gamers, for entrepreneurs, for artists that want to enter the space?
Ooh, well, that's a lot to unpack with just
I know.
60 seconds left. Well, I would say just like stay the path. Like I am not at all concerned about culture. I'm not at all concerned about art. I think we are very much on the right path. Of course, it might not always feel that way to everybody all the time. There's bumps along the road, but yeah, stay the course. Like we've come so far as a civilization, right? And I was talking about this the other day. Like we've gone from like asking our friends, like, is this a spot that's Instagrammable? And now we want to talk about things like, is it memeable? Right? Like it's part of our culture. So keep memeing and have fun, because we don't know what will come next, but it'll be a gradual evolutionary process we'll do together.
I think the most powerful thing, one of the most powerful things about Web3 is that once you fully get into Web3, you actually become more financially literate. That's actually
Yes,
really interesting,
yes.
right? So for instance, when you think about all the NFT artists, artists who went into NFTs, suddenly they started trading. And they started looking at tokens, and they started trading and buying other NFTs. Not like a professional trader. It was more like they started to get interested in money, which they never did before, for example. And I think that's one of the great, powerful unlocks in Web3, where I think if we succeed in bringing basically more cultural assets into Web3, whether it's sort of RWA physical or whether it's something digital, will actually make the world more literate. So think about all the people who in the Philippines were playing Axie. Now they actually became financially literate. They had a wallet, they were actually making jobs, they were trading tokens. Before, they knew even nothing about money because they were completely unbanked, right? So to me, that's actually one of the incredible unlocks, because then you create a larger population that's more financially literate, that then actually knows more about money, which then creates not just more liquidity, but also a broader, better, safer space for financial services. And this is the final point I would say. Culture is something that we connect with emotionally. We always learn better for something that we feel for. One of the reasons, my mom was a musician, and she never cared about money because she didn't understand it, and money and music back in those days were not really connected, and actually not much connected today anyway. And she was never able to invest in music. That wasn't an option. So if you told my mother, or any musician, you should invest in a stock, or invest in Tesla, or invest in some company over in the world, or maybe Bitcoin, they're like, I don't care about this. You won't invest your time in something you have no affinity to. But if you connect it with someone that you love, then you start digging deeper into this, right? We see this, right? When you go to school and you love a topic, you learn it well. And if you don't, your eyes glaze over and you don't even care. And I think that's the problem about financial services. We focus a lot on financial services, but only 1 or 2% of the world care. Most of us don't care about money in that way. But if you introduce the topics you love, which is why culture is important, whether it's movies, film, gaming, and then you bring the Web3 layer, they actually become more financially literate, and that's how we onboard them.
I'll keep it brief because we're out of time. I just genuinely believe we're really scratching the surface with this, and there is so much untapped potential. I think it's going to change the world, what we're doing, and the fact that everyone's here in this room today, even we're miles ahead. So yeah, let's go.
I guess this is the natural course of cultural development alongside the fourth industrial revolution.
Yes.
So nothing to worry about. Thank you guys so much. Please give a big round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you.